On January 18, 1871, King Wilhelm of Prussia was formally proclaimed Kaiser of the Second German Empire. In 1918, the empire would officially come to an end. Lasting just over 40 years, the Second Reich had been one of the strongest nations in all the world and had dominated European affairs for decades. This begs the question, how was a nation that was so central to European affairs rise and fall so quickly? The answer to that question begins with Otto von Bismarck. Otto von Bismarck was one of the most influential and skilled politicians of all time, and his policies would come to define the early days of the German Empire. He was known as the Iron Chancellor, and through his work, Germany would become the foremost power in all of Europe. Much of Bismarck's life's work had been spent unifying Germany under the banner of Prussia, but now, as Chancellor of the German Empire, he would spend the rest of his days making Germany untouchable through securing alliances with Russia, England, and Austria. He had succeeded in creating a European peace, but one dominated by Germany and Bismarck. Yet Germany still had her enemies, including France, who still sought to reclaim her lost territories of Alsace and Lorraine, which she had lost during the Franco-Prussian War years before. But Bismarck was certain that as long as he prevented an alliance between France and Russia, Germany would always be on top, and France would be unable to act. But as soon as France and Russia found themselves as allies, Germany would be surrounded by enemies, and in a very precarious situation. But the rise of Germany had thrown off the balance of power in Europe, and the rise of a new great power right in the heart of the continent had created worries with the other major European powers. But Bismarck, the master of statecraft, had managed to keep everything together and maintain peace throughout Europe in his time. Bismarck was smart, and he knew what he needed to do. He knew that Germany could not afford to expand, as its small size, its terrible geographical position, made expansionism this ridiculous luxury that Germany simply could not afford. But Otto von Bismarck had made himself central to not only Germany, but all of Europe, and as such everything in Europe revolved around Bismarck, and as long as Bismarck remained Chancellor of Germany, crisis in Europe could be avoided. In fact, Waddington, the Premier of France, a country which had every reason to hate Bismarck, still couldn't help but respect the man. And of Bismarck, Waddington had this to say: "It is my firm conviction that as long as Bismarck remains at the rudder, we can count unconditionally upon Germany's good faith. Once the Chancellor lays down his office, stormy times will descend upon Europe." Kaiser Wilhelm II was the son of Frederick Wilhelm and grandson of Kaiser Wilhelm I. And if you're wondering, yes, Kaiser Wilhelm II did have a son named Wilhelm. And yes, his son Wilhelm did then also have a son of his own named Wilhelm. And that Wilhelm, however, only had daughters. But one of his daughters did have a son named Wilhelm. So, if you take one thing away from this whole video, it's that if you have a child, you should absolutely name them Wilhelm. Oh, in fact, actually, before we really get into this, I'd like to take a quick moment to do a little bit of a Wilhelm retrospective here. Alright, so let's start right at the bottom. We have the Wilhelm, who is the son of the daughter of Prince Wilhelm. Prince Wilhelm, the son of Crown Prince Wilhelm. Crown Prince Wilhelm being the son of Kaiser Wilhelm II, who is the son of Kaiser Frederick Wilhelm. Kaiser Frederick Wilhelm, the son of Kaiser Wilhelm I. Kaiser Wilhelm I is brother of King Frederick Wilhelm, and King Frederick Wilhelm of Prussia is the son of King Frederick Wilhelm III, who is the son of King Frederick Wilhelm II, who's the son of King Frederick the Great. No Wilhelm there, but King Frederick the Great is son of King Frederick Wilhelm I. So if you were keeping track, that's 10 Wilhelms in one family, because coming up with names is hard. But as for Kaiser Wilhelm II, he was an idealist. He believed in what Bismarck called popular absolutism. He believed he was the smartest monarch and the greatest statesman in Europe. Compared to many of his peers, he sort of was. He was a great speech giver, had excellent memory and a wisdom far greater than many of his advisors. He was likable and charming and a great lover of peace, and truly believed that only he could bring happiness to his people. However, he had one debilitating defect, a crippled left arm that was shorter than his right, that haunted him all his life. As such, he could not serve in the army, which, given the prestigious heritage of Prussia, was terrible, as Prussian princes were expected to be good soldiers. And as of his character, Princess Daisy of Pless, a woman whom Wilhelm had been sweet on, said of him, "Great areas in his soul had, like his arm, simply not grown. As a man, he is impossible. He is so dreadfully tactless, loud, and theatrical. He has no manners. He does not know how to choose his friends." And German Field Marshal Waldersee said of him, "A single idea governs all his actions, the desire to be popular." Kaiser Wilhelm I had even written to Bismarck saying that due to Wilhelm's arrogance and lack of maturity, he should not have any say in foreign policy. Wilhelm II lacked the modesty of his grandfather Wilhelm I, and as such he considered himself an emissary of God, and therefore infallible. The Kaiser's vanity, however, was not his only great flaw, as he also proved to be an incredibly lazy head of state. Rarely would he do any work, and he would spend more than 1/5 of his entire reign aboard his private yacht, the Hohenzollern. After the death of his father, Kaiser Frederick Wilhelm, who had only reigned for a few short months, Wilhelm II was proclaimed Kaiser of Germany, and shortly after which, one of the first things he did was to fire Bismarck. The official reason was flimsy and held no true water. The true reason was Kaiser Wilhelm II wanted to rule Germany alone. His new Chancellor, General von Caprivi, was expressly instructed to never go to Bismarck for advice. The era of Bismarck was over. The firing of Bismarck had caused a strain with Russia, and the alliance between Germany and Russia was not renewed. Wilhelm soon lost faith in his new Chancellor Caprivi and fired him, replacing him with Chlodwig Hohenlohe, who's renowned mostly for his hard-to-pronounce name, as he was an old and senile politician who accomplished very little as Chancellor. When the Philippines revolted against Spain in the Spanish-American War, Kaiser Wilhelm decided to send the Navy to try and take it over despite U.S. ships already being in the harbor. Wilhelm backed off, but this soured his relationship with the United States. Germany then started trying to court Japan as an ally against France and Russia by threatening armed intervention in the conflict between Japan and Russia and France. This appeased nobody, and the German ambassador's words would later be used as a reason for Japan to go to war with Germany in World War I. During the Boxer Rebellion, Kaiser Wilhelm wanted to destroy the Chinese rebels, saying, "No quarter will be given, no prisoners to be taken. Whoever falls into your hands, let his life be forfeit. The Huns under King Attila 1,000 years ago made a name for themselves that has remained mighty in tradition and tale to this day. May you make the name of the Germans a thing to conjure within China for 1,000 years, so that never again will a Chinese dare so much as look askance at a German." This harsh order would later be the reason the German soldiers were called Huns in World War I. But for the Boxer Rebellion, Wilhelm put his best man, Field Marshal Waldersee, in charge of the Allied coalition. Except Peking had already been liberated before he arrived, so Wilhelm left Waldersee in Asia as Supreme Commander of the International Army, where his health began to fail from the climate, and he died shortly after returning home. Germany's imperial ambitions in Asia also brought them into conflict with England, especially when he tried to create a railroad to Baghdad. But when Russia and England tried to speak to Germany about it, the Germans became prideful and guarded about the whole project. England worried that the railroad would cause people to leave her colonies, and Russia wanted Germany's guarantee that they wouldn't stop Russia in the Bosphorus, which Germany refused to give. This alone may not have caused problems, but combined with the many other diplomatic blunders of Kaiser Wilhelm, the ties between England and Germany had begun to sever. Still, Queen Victoria of England was Kaiser Wilhelm's grandmother, and Tsar Nicholas II was Wilhelm's cousin, so it still wasn't too late. Except Wilhelm blamed Victoria for his dang little arm, and Victoria thought Wilhelm was selfish. Wilhelm wanted to impress the English into bowing before his magnificency, which he thought he could accomplish by building a navy. Bismarck objected strongly to this, for he knew a German navy could not ever hope to match England's, and attempting to would only make an enemy with them. They needed England as an ally to prevent a naval blockade from France, and if they went to war with England, they wouldn't stand a chance on the seas anyway, so there was no point to a navy then. Wilhelm, once again, completely ignored Bismarck's advice and went ahead anyway. Bismarck would die soon, in 1898. The next chancellor to come to power in Germany would be Bernhard von Bülow, and he's not particularly great. He was a spineless flatterer who let all the other countries of Europe walk all over him, especially during the Moroccan crisis, in which Germany tried to challenge French control over Morocco. The French got angry, and von Bülow threatened war with no intention of ever following through on it. Eventually, the matter would be settled at the Algeciras Conference, where all but Austria-Hungary sided against Germany. By now, Austria-Hungary was Germany's only friend in the world, and would result in the closening of relations between the United Kingdom and France. In just 10 years of Kaiser Wilhelm's reign, he had somehow managed to make enemies with France, Russia, England, the United States, and Japan. Only Austria remained his ally. For all the diplomatic failings of the Kaiser, he had succeeded in creating a flourishing economy in Germany. Income and prosperity were increasing across all classes in Germany. However, this could most likely be attributed to the economic policies put in place by Bismarck decades earlier, and not anything unique to Kaiser Wilhelm II. Should also be noted that Germany, while not a democracy, it was an autocratic monarchy, there did exist the Reichstag, which had a minimal amount of power, and its members were elected by universal male suffrage, where every vote was equal and voter identities kept secret, something no other European nation had. This resulted in the growing representation of the Social Democrats, who opposed the absolute rule of the Kaiser and sought to abolish the current system, and they had been becoming ever more popular during the latter years of Kaiser Wilhelm's reign. Similar to Prussia, from which Germany formed, the main power of Germany came from control of the army. As long as Kaiser Wilhelm maintained the army's loyalty, he would have nothing to fear from the Social Democrats. Another threat to the Kaiser's power was the ever-increasing industrialization of Germany. Most monarchs' powers are derived from their control over the agricultural sector, but as the industrial sector became more prevalent with the rise of the middle class, the Kaiser's rule was becoming less and less absolute. Once again, this was something that Bismarck had planned for. He had made great measures to not pursue colonial and imperial ambitions, as the acquisition of these new goods and resources would only increase the power of the industrial middle class. But none of the succeeding chancellors had managed to stop this, and as such, when Kaiser Wilhelm II began acquiring colonial territory for Germany, the industrial sector grew in power. You might have noticed a pattern by now. In 1907, Kaiser Wilhelm took a visit to Britain, during which a transcript of a conversation he had was sent to Chancellor von Bülow. Wilhelm had asked Bülow not to pass it on, but Bülow did anyways without reading the transcript, and a news article was published about the conversation in which Wilhelm had said many controversial things, including but not limited to, the English were as mad as March hares. He could not understand why they repeatedly rejected his offers of friendship. Most Germans disliked the English, so his own friendly attitude put him in a distinct minority. He had intervened against France and Russia on Britain's side during the Second Boer War. He had provided the campaign plan that was used by the British during that war, and one day they might come to be glad that Germany was building up its fleet because of the rise of Japan. Wilhelm thus managed to offend the Japanese, French, Russian, and especially the British. Even Germans were outraged, as he claimed to have helped the British against the Germanic Boers. Wilhelm's confidence in von Bülow was lost, and on July 14, 1909, he was forced to resign, and Theobald von Bethmann-Hollweg became the new chancellor. He was immediately faced with a divided Germany, who after the disastrous fiscal policies of von Bülow could not be made to agree on anything. Bethmann Hollweg struggled to make any progress in matters of foreign policy, or the construction of Germany's navy, which had been fraught with several issues since its inception. However, in 1911, the Chancellor struck a plan to use the French intervention in Morocco as an excuse to acquire colonial territories in Africa, a plan which all of Germany seemed to support. However, Germany had failed to consider how Britain may react to such a thing, and Britain proved that it was too concerned with maintaining the balance of power in Europe and could not allow such a thing to happen. After which, the press began to push the idea of a war against Britain. All the while the German Navy continued to cause internal issues between the Secretary of the Navy, Alfred von Tirpitz, and Chancellor Bethmann Hollweg, the Chancellor sought to delay further expansion of the Navy, whilst Tirpitz sought to make Germany the premier naval power in the world, and by 1914, Germany would have the second largest navy in the world. The Navy, however, wasn't the only part of the military being expanded, and the German army's budget had been ever increasing to the point where it consumed the largest portion of the entire country's budget. With Germany's naval arms race against Great Britain and its massive land army, Germany had readily prepared themselves for war. All they needed now is a casus belli. Archduke Franz-Ferdinand, heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary, planned a trip to Sarajevo for his anniversary with his wife Sofia. However, the Serbian people were agitated with the ideas of nationalism, and a group known as the Black Hand decided they would use this opportunity to assassinate Franz. On June 28, 1914, the Archduke arrived in Sarajevo and took part in a parade throughout the city. The Black Hand had his route mapped out, and several of its members stationed throughout, each one of them ready and willing to die to accomplish this goal. As Ferdinand's car passed through the route, nothing happened. The assassins couldn't go through with the plan, either out of fear or pity for his wife. But finally, one assassin works up the courage and steps forth, throwing a grenade towards the car. Except he blows up the wrong car. In his escape, he jumps off the bridge into the river below, except the river is shallow, only a few feet deep, and he breaks his legs in the fall. Not wanting to be captured, he decides to end his life by taking a cyanide pill. Except the pill is expired, so all it really does is make him throw up. So the would-be assassin just sort of lays there in the shallow river in a pool of his own puke, and the police come and take him away. The leader of the plot, a man named Gavrilo Princip, accepts defeat and decides to go and visit his favorite deli for a ham sandwich. History may not always remember everything, but at least it gets the most important details. Meanwhile, the Archduke decides to visit the hospital and go and see the people who are wounded in the attack. So he gets back in the car and off he goes, except his driver doesn't know the way, and he takes a wrong turn where he stops directly in front of the deli where Gavrilo Princip is eating his ham sandwich. Princip immediately takes action, stands up, and fires 2 shots, both of which connect. One hits the Archduke, and the other hits his wife. In their final moments, Franz Ferdinand clutches his dying wife, begging her to live for their children's sake, before they both pass away. While many of the details of this assassination may come off as rather humorous, it's important to remember that at the end of it, 2 people still died. Austria-Hungary is furious, and they want to go to war against Serbia for this. Germany agrees to back Austria no matter what they do. After which, Kaiser Wilhelm II decides to take another vacation on his yacht for the next 3 weeks with no way to contact him. Ironically, Archduke Franz Ferdinand had been Serbia's greatest supporter in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, so with him dead, there was nobody to be the voice of peace. Serbia's independence was guaranteed by Russia, but for as long as all of Europe mourned the death of the Archduke, Austria could hope that no European powers would intervene in a war against Serbia. Only the Austrian ambassador to Serbia and the Russian ambassador to Serbia believed there could still be peace, and these two came together to see if such a peace could be agreed to. But before anything was decided, the Russian ambassador died of a heart attack. Austria decides to send an ultimatum to Serbia, but they delay sending it while the French ambassador is in Russia, as it allowed the 2 countries to make decisions too quickly, and so they wait until after he leaves to send it. But by then, the memory of the assassination was no longer fresh in people's minds, but the ultimatum was sent anyways. The ultimatum had 10 points in total, including requiring Serbia to take down anti-Austrian propaganda, But the most important of these 10 points would be the sixth one, which would have given Austrian police the power to conduct an official investigation inside Serbia's borders using their own police, which Serbia could not agree to, as it would have been tantamount to giving up their own state's sovereignty. But the ultimatum was not designed to be accepted, rather to be rejected, as it would give Austria an excuse to go to war and not seem like the bad guy in Europe. But Russia, upon hearing of this ultimatum, encourages Serbia not to accept, and begins to mobilize its forces. Sergei Sazonov, the Russian foreign minister, meets with the German diplomat Karl Friedrich von Portales. Portales begs for solidarity between the monarchies. He says that all the monarchies of Europe need to work together, or they'll all fall together. Sazonov says that if Austria-Hungary annex Serbia, then Russia will go to war. Except Austria-Hungary, however, had no intention of annexing Serbia, and the Hungarians refused to support the war if that would be the case. But Portales didn't know this. He was the German ambassador, not the Austrian one, and so that intention was never communicated to Russia. Serbia sends their reply to Austria. Serbia has agreed to all the points of the ultimatum, except one, the sixth point. They would not give Austrian officials police powers within Serbia, and the Serbians agreed to submit to the resolution of a conference if the Austrians did not find the terms to be fair. This was bad for Austria, as now the Serbians seemed like the good guys in Europe, and Austria knew if they went to this conference they would be outvoted for sure. And so Austria seeks the advice of its German advisors, who are frustrated that Austria had not already declared war. And so Austria tries to mobilize, but that process will take weeks what the Austrians had wasted by delaying the ultimatum. But on the 28th of July, a whole month after the Archduke's death, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. That very morning, Kaiser Wilhelm II returns home to Germany and reads the Serbian reply. Realizing what is happening, Wilhelm tries to the best of his ability to stop the war, but it's too late. Wilhelm tries to appeal to his cousin Tsar Nicholas II of Russia to cancel mobilization, but it's too late for that. Nicholas considers it, but decides that he cannot, because he needs to show the world that he is not some wavering leader, but he is a strong and decisive one, and he gives the order for mobilization. And so the Great War begins. Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, Russia declares war on Austria-Hungary in defense of Serbia, Germany declares war on Russia, which causes France to declare war on Germany, Germany marched troops through Belgium, which caused Britain to declare war on Germany, the Ottoman Empire declares war on their old enemy Russia, and by extent, the rest of the Allied powers. Italy is called in by Germany and Austria, as they are allies, but Italy refuses as their alliance is a defensive one, and nearly a year later, Italy is going to declare war on Germany and Austria. Bulgaria declares war on Serbia, which causes Romania to declare war on Austria-Hungary. The Allies call in Japan, and Japan declares war on Germany and seizes their Asian colonies. Germany declares war on Portugal because they were seizing German ships or whatever, and eventually, a few years later and an intercepted telegram, the United States declares war on Germany. The beginning of World War I was clearly not a well-planned thing. It was very loose-knit. This whole web of alliances just sort of coming together to create this one ultimate disaster. It is worth noting that many of the people who were running these countries were not the most capable of people. Right? Gone were the days of Otto von Bismarck and people of his caliber. Wilhelm II was honestly one of the best people running a country at that time. And given what we've already known about him, that says a lot about the bar that was set by the other leaders. But war was declared. There is something funny about the start of World War I, at least until you get to the part where everybody dies. Now, I'm not going to talk much about World War I itself. If you want to learn more about World War I, there's plenty of stuff out there, but all we need to know for this purpose is that Germany does not win. And then, by 1918, 40 million people would be dead. All for a war that never should have started to begin with. On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the guns went silent for the last time, and World War I officially drew to a close. After the armistice, a peace conference was to be held in Versailles, the same place and on the same day that Kaiser Wilhelm I had been crowned decades ago. The Big Four leaders, Woodrow Wilson of the United States, David Lloyd George of Britain, George Clemenceau of France, and Vittorio Orlando of Italy met, but neither Germany nor Austria was invited. Here it was decided that Germany would be at fault for the war, and would be required to cede Alsace and Lorraine back to France, and give up all its colonies, demilitarize the Rhineland, and dramatically decrease the size of its army, as well as pay a massive amount of reparations to the Allies. Before Bismarck died in 1898, he had met with Kaiser Wilhelm II one last time, and told him, "Your Majesty, so long as you have this present officer corps, you can do as you please. But when this is no longer the case, it will be very different for you. The crash will come 20 years after my departure if things go on like this." On November 9th, 1918, Kaiser Wilhelm II was forced to abdicate after the civilian leaders and the army announced that Wilhelm had lost their support. Wilhelm would spend the rest of his days in exile living in the Netherlands. While the Allies had originally wanted to try him as a war criminal, Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands refused to extradite him, probably because they both had Wilhelm in their name. Wilhelm died on June 4th, 1941, at the age of 81. Seeing what was going on in Germany before he died, he would remark that it made him ashamed to be a German. After the abdication of the Kaiser, Germany would be controlled by the Weimar Republic, a republic primarily dominated by several members of the Social Democratic Party. The Weimar Republic was forced to deal with the aftermath of losing, and the rampant inflation it caused by failing to properly address the war reparations it owed and just printing money willy-nilly. Bitter from their defeat and the state of the country, the German people soon took to a new movement that was on the rise, and it would be so that Germany's darkest days were still yet to come.